What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G and going over whether or not it's still a good phone to buy in 2023. Now, as always, if you end up wanting to learn more about this phone, be sure to check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we're getting a pretty large 6.6-inch 120Hz PLS LCD display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 400, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So in general, definitely a great display here. At 6.6 inches, again, it is decently large, which does tend to be a good thing if you're consuming a lot of content or really just being on your phone in general. With the 120Hz refresh rate, we are getting nice fast movement on the screen, so it's going to feel a bit more premium to use. The 1080p resolution, of course, is going to give us a nice sharp, crisp image, which is great for stuff like watching videos, for example. Stuff where the image quality is a bit more important, and despite having a PLS LCD and not like an AMOLED, it still is decently bright, the colors are nice, and for what it is, the viewing angles are pretty good too. So overall, if you're looking for a more affordable phone that has a really nice display, the A23 5G will be a great choice. Now for storage, with the A23 5G, we're getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion. So on one hand, definitely not bad. I feel like for the average user, you probably will get by here. But on the other hand, I feel like at this point in 2023, I would consider 64GB to be more of a bare minimum. So if you're someone who's downloading lots of apps and games and stuff like that, you might want to consider getting something that has maybe like 128 or 256, because despite not being terrible, if you're putting a lot of stuff on your phone, even with the microSD card expansion to help, 64GB is still going to fill up pretty quickly. For security features, this phone does have Face Unlock and a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. So definitely a great spot for a fingerprint scanner, but let's give it a try. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, this phone does have Face Unlock too, so always nice to get both options. For the camera setup, with the A23 5G, up front, we get a water drop notch design for the selfie camera. Not really the best design, but I guess it does at least look decent. This camera is 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So in general, definitely a great camera setup here. If you're taking a decent amount of pictures, you want things to look good, and you want a good variety of features, you're definitely not going to go wrong with this phone. To give you an idea of what it can do, here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, and in general, I do think the photo quality here is definitely good. Sure, on one hand, if you compare it to a much higher end device like, say, a Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, or even more of a mid-range phone like the A54 5G, the quality is not going to be quite as good, but at the same time, for the average user, I feel like you're really not going to need much more than this. If you're really just taking pictures to send to friends and family, maybe keep for your own memories like vacation photos, stuff like that, and even the occasional Instagram photo every now and then. Overall, for typical casual use, the A23 5G will get the job done just fine, and honestly, for what it is, for a phone you can typically find under $300, I do think the photo quality here is pretty impressive. And one more thing I do want to point out here for video, it does have a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so unfortunately no 4K here. Now when it comes to the RAM and processor, with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor. When it comes to performance, I would say this phone is pretty good. Honestly, it really just depends on your expectations. On one hand, if you're expecting this phone to be super fast, if you're doing stuff like high performance mobile gaming or maybe editing videos and stuff like that, you might be a little disappointed, and really if you're going to be on your phone all day doing all kinds of demanding activities, you are going to want to get something a bit faster. But at the same time, keep in mind, despite being pretty good for what it is, at the end of the day, the A23 5G is still more of an entry-level phone. And considering this, I actually think the performance is pretty good for typical daily activities like web browsing, social media, streaming content like videos and music, and maybe some light mobile gaming. For that sort of activity, I do think this phone will get the job done just fine. And in my experience, I haven't had any slowdowns or lagging or really any performance issues at all. So again, in general, if you're looking for a phone that has really good performance for basic activities, the A23 5G will be a great choice. Now I did run a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone, and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of where this phone stands performance-wise compared to your current device. Because of course, depending on what you're coming from, it may or may not actually be an upgrade. If you're coming from something like a Samsung Galaxy S10 for example, that's a bit older but definitely higher end, then yeah, in that case, this phone might feel like a bit of a downgrade. But if you're coming from a typical mid-range phone, then chances are this phone will actually be a pretty decent upgrade. But again, overall, despite not being maybe the fastest phone you'll ever see, I do think the performance we get with the A23 5G will be good enough for most people. Now for the battery, with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that also supports 25 watt fast charging, so definitely a great battery here. With a 5000 mAh battery, you can't expect to get real good battery life, so if you're in a situation where maybe you're not always around a charger, but you still need to use your phone all day, then a phone like this that has a really large battery will be a great choice. And then of course down the road as the battery degrades, which all batteries do, with such a large battery, you're not going to notice it nearly as quickly as you would with a much smaller battery. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a longer time without replacing it, then this phone will be a great choice. Now for the software, with the A23 5G, we are getting Android 13, so definitely great to see there. And also keep in mind, in case you don't know, Samsung does have really good software support, so with this phone, you can expect to get several other major updates in the future. And considering it is almost a year old at this point, this is definitely a nice thing because compared to say Motorola for example, sure Motorola phones typically get like one major update, but even with a phone like the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2023, that phone is technically newer than this one, but despite probably getting like Android 14, if I had to guess I would say that's most likely the only major update it's going to get, whereas with the A23 5G, you can expect to get Android 14, 15, and 16. So despite again being almost a year old at this point, the software support you get with this phone is honestly quite a bit better than a lot of phones that are coming out at this point in 2023. So if you are looking for a phone that has a bunch of major updates, maybe you want to keep your phone for multiple years, but you still want to have the latest version of Android the whole time, then in that case, you're definitely not going to be disappointed with this phone. As far as other features go, with the A23 5G, we are getting NFC, so definitely nice to see. If you like to use tap and pay, you won't have to worry there. And in addition to this, we are getting a headphone jack with this phone, which on one hand, if you're not familiar with Samsung Galaxy A series phones lately, you might be wondering why this is important, but keep in mind, with pretty much every Samsung Galaxy A series phone higher end than this, you're not going to get a headphone jack. So this phone is unique in the sense that sure, on one hand, it's not quite as premium as say the A54 5G for example, but at the same time it does actually have a headphone jack, and despite not being like a make or break feature for most people, I feel like it is a nice thing to have, and down the road as time goes on, I'm sure more and more manufacturers are going to start doing away with headphone jacks, and honestly I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 years pretty much no phone has headphone jacks anymore. So it is definitely a feature we're really going to have to enjoy while we still can. But in conclusion, is the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G still worth buying in 2023? I would definitely say it is. Now, first of all, this phone factory unlocked at absolute full price, which you're probably not going to pay anymore, is going for around $300. And even at $300, I feel like this phone has a lot to offer. We're getting a really nice display, a great camera setup that not only has a bunch of features including an ultra wide camera and a macro camera, but also takes really good photos too. We're also getting really good performance, a large battery, features like NFC, and really good software support too. So in general, even at full price, I would say this phone is definitely still worth considering, but also keep in mind at this point in 2023, since this phone has been out for almost a year now, you are most likely going to find much better deals on it. And in addition to this, most US carriers are still offering it, and I've seen it going for like under $100, easily like $50, $60, and sometimes even free. And at that point, if you can get this phone for free or even like $50 or $60, if your needs aren't that complex and you're really just looking for an entry-level 5G phone for more basic activities, you definitely won't go wrong with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. Now once again, if you want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.